Hello, this is Ed Tyson from MMA Collector. Every week I will bring in a new piece of memorabilia from my personal collection and even bring in a few collector friends with some of theirs. Our goal is to raise awareness of MMA memorabilia collecting and discuss the historical people and fights that made this sport what it is today. Join me now while we take a stroll down memorabilia lane. In this episode of MMA Collector, we are going to look back at the evolution of the UFC's event program. On MMA Collector, we're going to take a look at the evolution of the UFC program. We'll start with UFC 1. This event was held on November 12th of 1993 in Denver, Colorado. It's a pretty small little program, just a few pages, and kind of tells a little bit the introduction about explains the fights, the 8-man tournament, and it basically just gets into, they said, tail of the tape, and it's just little bios on each fighter.
Yeah, and it looked, correct me if I'm wrong, but in old school speak, it looks like they did like a 4-color print there on the inside, which is like basically black, white, gray, and that red color. That's the only thing in there. So definitely an old school look and an old school feel. And not a lot of meat on the bones there.
No, not a lot. We have one more of these. This particular one was actually owned by the co-creator of the UFC, Art Davie, and he hung this in his office in Los Angeles at the time called War of the Worlds before they named it the UFC.
Awesome.
So this one has a pretty cool.
There you go.
And then we'll go into the UFC 2 program, which is quite similar to the UFC 1. A little bit more colors, a couple more extra pages, a little more advertising. But basically we then get to the fighter tail of the tape bios again, and it's...
And they switched the red to yellow, but they're still with 4-color print or, limited color. It's not all color, Mm-hmm. Some nice stuff, a little bit more expanded material in there, but still an old school feel there.
Then for UFC 3, they really kind of stepped back to just one little page that just shows the fighters that competed in the UFC 3.
Very, very interesting. Huh? Very light.
Yeah. Now we get into the Ultimate 95, and it's still a pretty small little program. For this event, they actually made a little souvenir poster program to go along with that was sold at the event. This was $4.95, and the event poster was $5.
There you go.
For the event program. Now for Ultimate Japan, they got into a little bit bigger program, a little more colorful, quite a bit nicer. This was still owned by SEG, obviously, and some of it's in Japanese. Quite a bit nicer program.
Yeah, probably produced over there, and they put their touches on it. So this is leaps and bounds better than they've been doing till then.
Now this is the program from UFC 30, which is the first Zuffa event. This kind of reminds me of the Japanese programs, and I think after this they were all pretty much similar to like what we saw in Japan. This is a little smaller, but again, it's very colorful, quite a few pages, lots of information on the fighters. This particular one has some autographs in it. But yeah, pretty nice program. This is a UFC 39. I like this program too. It's pretty similar to that one. So from here, this is their 10-year anniversary program, which have been UFC 45, I believe, yes. This is smaller again, but yet the same feel, colorful.
Yeah, it's a lot more in your face now, They work on that, total package there. You're looking a little more modern and stuff, huh?
Mm-hmm.
For sure. So we're out of the Stone Ages.
Yes, this one brings us to UFC 71.
That's 91.
Again, or 91.
91.
Yeah, 91.
Yeah.
And again, it's a bigger program, thicker. Lesnar fought Couture in this one.
Yeah.
And then last, we're gonna take a look at the UFC 100 program.
And this was, their biggest show to date at that point. And it did box office 1.6 million pay-per-view buys. 5,000 people seeing it live at the Mandalay Bay. And the program, look at this. So Chuck, the program is not just delivering information about the fights and the fight night. They're also like a tribute here to Chuck Liddell and his Hall of Fame induction. Mass from Tap Out's Hall of Fame induction. So they're adding pages here. I believe there's also sections where they select the top 10 submissions, top 10 knockouts, top 10 fights in UFC history. So the UFC 100 was a show of force for them.
Yeah, and from 1 to 100, it changed quite a bit in the course of those years.
There you go.
This was a span of about 15 years.
15 years, and the 15-year anniversary of UFC 100 is coming up in a little bit next year.
The 30th. Yeah, this year, 30th anniversary, yeah.
30th of the UFC, but no, 15th anniversary of UFC 100
yes.
is in 2024, so a lot of anniversaries they can celebrate nowadays, but nothing like that UFC 100, and thank you for this walk through the program. It's very interesting. That UFC 3 one's a letdown.
It is.
But this one certainly is not. Thanks, Ed.
Yep.
Back in July of 2009, UFC 100 broke a lot of records, and the UFC was now a mainstream business. UFC 100, July 11th, 2009, attracted more than 5,000 people to the Mandalay Bay, and they sold more than 1.6 million pay-per-views. The presence of pro wrestler Brock Lesnar in the rematch against nemesis Frank Mir headlined a stellar card from top to bottom. Lesnar would parlay his UFC success into mainstream stardom and big bucks with the WWE. UFC 100 also featured Canada's George St. Pierre in a title defense against American top team's Thiago Alves. Perhaps the most memorable moment came when Dan Henderson flattened Michael Bisping in a middleweight bout. As we tape in 2023, the 15-year anniversary of UFC 100 is about a year away, and by now, the show has been surpassed on box office lists a handful of times. The UFC continues to grow, but those who saw UFC 100, especially those who were there live at the Mandalay Bay, call it unforgettable.
Tune in for the next episode of MMA Collector for some rare items from UFC 100.
If you enjoyed our video, take a moment to like and share, and subscribe to the MMA Collector on YouTube and join our collector community.